Good morning, everybody. I'm out here in the snow because it was during the winter of 1904-1905 that the Russo-Japanese War was happening, where Korea and China touch each other. And at stake was who would be the master of East Asia as well as the Pacific. The Russians had built the Trans-Siberian Railroad to Vladivostok, which is on the top of this map. They also went through Harbin to build a railroad down to Port Arthur. You can see that on the left. It's not called Port Arthur today. This appealed to the Russians because Port Arthur was ice-free all year round, whereas Vladivostok wasn't. But the Japanese did not like this. They saw this as impinging on their area of influence. Remember, in the 1850s, Commodore Perry, an American, had sailed to Japan and forced the Japanese to become less isolationist. So Japan decided they wanted to be a major power in the region, but they didn't have raw materials. Now, Port Arthur is on the water, and it is surrounded by a series of hills. When the war started, which was on this date, the Russians had occupied all the high ground around the town, and here's a picture of the Russian army. So for the Japanese to be victorious, they had to attack these fortified positions, and the Japanese had a lot of casualties as they did human wave assaults on the Russian positions around Port Arthur. Here's a picture of the Japanese army. And during the war, weapons that are going to be all too familiar in World War I make their appearance, like long-distance howitzers, barbed wire, extensive trenches, and this one. This is the machine gun. Mr. Maxim created it in 1884, and it was used extensively in the Russo-Japanese War, pointing toward World War I 10 years later. Here's one of the siege cannons that the Japanese used to great effectiveness. They were able to get these on the high ground overlooking the harbor, and eventually they were able to sink the ships the Russians had in the harbor. And here's a photograph of Russian ships sunk at Port Arthur. So this was a huge blow to the Russian war effort. Another blow came when the Russian Baltic fleet, which sailed all the way around Africa, look at the blue line here, the Russian Baltic fleet met the Japanese fleet at the Battle of Tsushima off the coast of Korea, and you can see where that happened. This was the first battle of the modern battleship, all-steel, big-gun warship that all the naval powers were having around 1900. It was one of the first battles where radio was used, and the Russian Navy was absolutely annihilated by this. And that happened in May of 1905. So by the time we get to the summer of 1905, both sides were looking to end the war somehow. So Teddy Roosevelt offered to be a middleman, and he invited representatives to come to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, to that area, to work on some armistice and ultimately a peace treaty. So that's what happened. The delegates stayed here at the Wentworth Hotel, which is still there. You can visit it, and on display they have a rowboat that they used to row across the river over to the Navy Yard in Kittery, Maine, where they did the negotiations. The war ended, and Teddy Roosevelt won the Nobel Peace Prize, the first of 4 American presidents to win the Peace Prize. In Russia, this led to the Revolution of 1905. Here you see a picture of Russian troops shooting on Russian civilians. This was a huge embarrassment to the Tsar. It led to some political reform, not many, but it gave the opportunity for Lenin, pictured here, to come out of exile and come back to Russia and get working on the Bolshevik Party, which in 1917 was able to seize power during World War I. Japan was emboldened by this, and they annexed Korea in 1910, and eventually became more aggressive in the mainland of Asia, basically for raw materials. So all the red you see here is land occupied by Japan before or during World War II. So just as in 1905, the Japanese tried to sink and were successful with the Russian fleet, In 1941, December 7, they tried to sink the American fleet at Pearl Harbor, pictured here, thus bringing us into World War II.